I never thought I'd be standing in a cemetery saying goodbye to my 7-year-old daughter. No parent does. Yet, there I was, frozen in place before Maria's tiny, white casket. His favorite Rosa blanket was tucked in with her, because she always said it made her feel safe. Safe. The very thing I'd failed to give her when it mattered most. That crushing realization weighed on me far more than the whispers coming from behind me in the pews. We weren't just mourning Maria. My family were dissecting my life, picking apart every piece with silent judgment. I could feel their stares like needles in my back, their speculation as sharp as blades. Where's his wife? I imagined them murmuring. How could she not be here? Small-town gossip has a way of clinging to tragedy, and I knew my loss would no longer be the only thing they'd talk about. My wife's absence was glaring, almost like a spotlight shining on all the things I didn't want exposed. But what the town didn't know, what no one knew, was the secret I discovered just minutes before church prayer. My phone buzzed with a notification, and without thinking, I glanced at it. I was expecting another condolence message, maybe a question about the service. Instead, what I saw made my stomach churn. The photo was vivid, almost too real, as if it had been taken moments earlier. My wife Olivia was lounging by a pool, her skin glowing under the Hawaiian sun. A man, young, tanned, and smug, had his arm wrapped possessively around her. A cocktail sat perched in her manicured hand. Below the image, a text read, "Thought you should see what your wife is really doing today. A concerned your friend?" At first, I couldn't even process it. My brain refused to associate the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my kid, with the person smiling in that photo. Olivia wasn't at a business meeting like she'd claimed. She wasn't sitting beside me at the front row of our kid's funeral, holding my hand. She was sipping margaritas in paradise, tangled up with some stranger. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, but there was no time to fall apart. My mom gently touched my arm, her voice low. "James, you're shaking," she said. She was right. My whole body trembled, the phone shaking in my grip until I shoved it into my pocket. As if hiding it could make it go away. It didn't. The image stayed seared in my mind, mocking me every time I blinked. Somehow, I forced myself to move. My legs felt like lead, but I kept my head high and my shoulders square. I refused to let anyone see me unravel. Not here, not now. Still, my thoughts churned violently, clawing through the past few months for signs I'd missed. Olivia's late-night phone calls. Her last-minute work trips always seemed urgent. The way she started pulling away, talking about needing space, just as Maria's condition worsened. I chalked it up to grief, convinced myself we were just processing things differently. I'd been such a fool. As the service began, I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms to keep myself grounded. The pastor's words about Maria were almost too much to bear. He talked about Maria's boundless energy, even in the hardest moments of her illness. Then he mentioned Maria's favorite pastime, coloring white roses with food dye. For a moment, I could see her again. His small hands stained rose and purple, her laughter filling the room. My gaze shifted to the bouquet on the casket. Roses, just as Maria would have wanted. My wife hated those roses. She always said they were too plain, but I insisted. They weren't for her. They were for our kid. And at that moment, I knew she didn't deserve to be part of this day, this moment, at all. My phone buzzed again, snapping me out of my thoughts. Another text, this time from Olivia. "Sorry I couldn't make it. Important business meeting. I'll make it up to you." Make it up to me? Make up for missing her own daughter's funeral? Make up for sipping cocktails while I laid our little girl to rest? The rage that surged through me was instant and blinding, burning away the grief for just a moment. One single thought crystallized in my mind. Olivia had no idea what was coming. I wasn't going to crumble like she expected. I wasn't going to play the grieving widower she could manipulate. Olivia may have abandoned us when Maria needed her most, but I wasn't about to let her betrayal go unanswered. That promise solidified as I stood to deliver the eulogy. I forced myself to look out at the crowd, at the faces of neighbors, co-workers, and friends. Every word I spoke was for Maria. I told stories about her joy, her strength, her creativity. I painted a picture of her beautiful, vibrant life. A life that wouldn't be tarnished by Olivia's absence or her cheating. I kept my voice steady. I didn't let it crack. Not a single tear fell. I saved those for later, when I'd be alone. Because today wasn't about me or about my wife. Today was about our kid. But deep down, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Olivia thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed. She was wrong. So very wrong. I gripped the photo frame tightly, the cold glass pressing into my palms as I tried to keep my emotions in check. "James," Diana said, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that didn't match the sharpness in her eyes. "You've been so strong today. It's just such a shame Olivia couldn't be here. But, you know, she's grieving in her own way. This has been so hard for her." Hard for her? The words hit me like a slap. My grip on the frame tightened as I turned to face her, my jaw clenching. Diana's expression carried a faint look of concern, the kind that barely masked the judgment lurking beneath her polite exterior. Her words weren't meant to comfort me. They were a subtle reprimand. "Oh, I'm sure it has," I replied, my voice colder than I intended. Though I imagine Hawaii's a pretty good place to process all that grief. For just a moment, her perfectly composed mask slipped. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she quickly recovered. "James," she began, her tone shifting to one of patronizing reason. "Grief makes people act out of character. Olivia just needed some space to process everything. You should try to be more understanding." Understanding. My nails dug into my palms as I fought to stay calm. Did she know? Or was she just that oblivious? Maybe she did know and didn't care. The urge to pull my phone out, shove the photo of Olivia in her face, and demand answers burned inside me. But I didn't. Instead, I turned away, carefully setting the photo of Maria back on the mantel with trembling hands. My mother appeared at my side, her presence steadying me in a way nothing else could. "Diana," she said sharply, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I think you've said enough." Diana stiffened, clearly taken aback, but she didn't argue. She retreated to the kitchen with the same air of superiority she always carried. The heavy silence that followed wrapped around my mother and me like a cocoon. "Don't let her get to you," Mom said softly, resting a comforting hand on my arm. "She's just trying to deflect." Her words lingered in the air, sinking into my chest like lead. "You think she knows?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mom's expression didn't change. "She's her mother," she said simply. "Of course she knows." The confirmation hit me like a gut punch. This wasn't just Claire's betrayal. It was a conspiracy of silence. Diana and Howard had likely known all along and chosen to shield Claire rather than confront the truth. The thought of their complicity made my blood boil. As the reception dragged on, I retreated to my dad's study, desperate for a moment of quiet. The familiar creak of his worn leather chair greeted me as I sank into it, the exhaustion of the day pressing down on me like a physical weight. My mind churned with memories, fragments of conversations and moments that I now saw in a completely different light. Olivia's late-night phone calls, the emergency work trips that seemed to come out of nowhere, the way she had slowly started pulling away, not just from me, but from Maria too. I thought about the missed doctor's appointments, the bedtime stories she forgot, the excuses that piled up. I had convinced myself she was overwhelmed, grieving in her own way. I had been so blind. I pulled out my phone and stared at the picture again, the image of Olivia and her lover glaring back at me like a taunt. My thumb hovered over the delete button, but I couldn't press it. That photo wasn't just proof of her infidelity. It was a reminder of what I was up against. I didn't know what my next move would be, but one thing was clear. Olivia wasn't going to get away with this. Not after abandoning me. Not after abandoning Maria. She thought she could escape the consequences of her actions, but she was wrong. A few days after the funeral, life became a monotonous blur of empty condolences, untouched casseroles, and sleepless nights. People came and went, their words rehearsed and hollow. "She's in a better place now. At least she's not suffering anymore." They meant well, but every platitude felt like another knife in my chest. What better place could there possibly be than here, in my arms, laughing at cartoons, or begging for pancakes for dinner. Grief clung to me like a second skin, heavy and suffocating. But beneath it, anger churned like a storm, growing stronger with every passing moment. That picture of Olivia, so carefree and content, wouldn't leave my mind. She wasn't just absent from Maria's funeral, she was celebrating her freedom. It was as if Maria's death had been her one-way ticket to paradise. I threw myself into cleaning Maria's room, hoping that keeping busy would dull the pain. Her favorite stuffed penguin sat on her bed, worn and lopsided from years of love. I picked it up, its familiar weight in my hands stirring a fresh wave of tears. She had taken it everywhere, even to the hospital. As I set the penguin gently back on her pillow, something on Olivia's desk caught my eye. A stack of papers sat there, carelessly left out in plain sight. It wasn't like her to leave anything disorganized. Her life was a constant stream of color-coded schedules and meticulous lists. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, pulled me closer. The top sheet stopped me cold. It was a life insurance policy. Maria's name was printed in bold at the top, with Olivia listed as the sole beneficiary. My heart pounded as I flipped through the pages, each one revealing more than the last. The policy was worth $1 million, taken out just 6 months after Maria's diagnosis. I had never been consulted. I had never even seen these papers before. What hit me hardest was the amendment. Just weeks before Maria's death, Olivia had removed me as a beneficiary. Her signature stared back at me, a smug reminder of the decision she had made without me. My hands shook as I rifled through the stack, uncovering receipts for loans she had taken out against the policy. Plane tickets, luxury expenses, the cocktails by the pool, her lover's expensive taste. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. Olivia hadn't just abandoned Maria and me emotionally. She had stolen from our family to fund her escape. The realization struck me like a freight train. Maria's death hadn't just marked the end of his life. It was the moment Olivia had chosen to bury our marriage right alongside him. A sudden buzz pulled me out of my thoughts. My phone, still on the desk, lit up with an unlisted number. I thought about ignoring the call. My head was pounding, my heart still weighed down by everything I had just uncovered. But something, a small, nagging voice inside, urged me to answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice rough and strained from the emotions of the past few days. "I need to talk to you." The voice on the other end was female, unfamiliar, and hesitant, but there was an urgency behind it that caught my attention. "It's about Olivia." My grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this?" "My name's Mia," she replied, pausing as if deciding how much to say. I know what she's been doing. I know about Hawaii. And I know you're not going to like what I have to tell you." My chest tightened, a sharp ache spreading through me. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, suspicion lacing my voice. "You shouldn't," she admitted without hesitation. "But you should hear me out. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main. Now." Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, her words echoing in my mind. Mia. The name didn't mean anything to me, but her urgency was impossible to ignore. Part of me hesitated. What if this was a waste of time? Or worse, a cruel game? But another part, the part that couldn't let go of that picture of Olivia in Hawaii, pushed me to go. I grabbed the folder with the insurance papers and stuffed it under my arm. If Mia had answers, I wanted to be ready, with questions, evidence, and the simmering anger that had been boiling just below the surface since the funeral. As I stepped out of the house, I glanced back at Maria's room. Her stuffed penguin sat neatly on the bed, a silent witness to the chaos unraveling around me. I made a promise, right then and there. Whatever Mia had to say, whatever truth I was about to face, I would make it right. For Maria. What I didn't know was that meeting Mia wouldn't just confirm my worst suspicions. It would lead me into a darkness I hadn't even begun to imagine. The coffee shop on Main was the kind of place Olivia would have rolled her eyes at. Plain, unassuming, and without a hint of the flair she always demanded in her life. The smell of over-roasted coffee and stale pastries hit me as I stepped inside. A quick glance around the room was all it took to find her. She sat at a corner table by the window, her auburn hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. Her posture was rigid, her hands wrapped around a mug that she stirred in slow, deliberate circles. Her phone lay face down on the table next to a small notebook. She didn't look up as I approached, but I knew it was her. "Mia?" I asked, sliding into the chair across from her. I dropped the folder onto the table with a dull thud. She finally looked at me, her green eyes sharp and assessing. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, her voice low but steady. "You have 5 minutes to explain why I'm here," I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. She raised an eyebrow, unfazed by my tone. "Fair enough. I'll get straight to the point. Your wife, Olivia, has been seeing my ex-boyfriend for over a year." The words hit me like a blow, but I refused to let it show. I didn't flinch. "I already know that," I replied flatly, though my voice carried a bitterness I couldn't hide. "Oh, you know," she said, tilting her head, her tone mocking. "Do you know about the money? Or how they're planning to use it to fund their dream life in Maui?" I froze. "What money?" Mia leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "The life insurance policy. The $1 million payout your wife collected after removing your son's name from the documents. She promised Brain, my ex, half of it so they could buy a beachfront property together." My stomach twisted painfully. I wanted to accuse her of lying, of making the whole thing up, but I didn't. Instead, I dug my fingers into the edge of the table and forced myself to stay. "How do you know all this?" She smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Brain isn't exactly a mastermind. He's been bragging about it for weeks. At first, I thought he was exaggerating. Olivia always struck me as too polished for someone like him. But then he started showing me proof." Mia grabbed her phone and scrolled through it with practiced precision before sliding it across the table. The screen lit up with messages that turned my stomach. "Olivia, the payout came through. It's more than enough. We'll be out of here by the end of the month. Brain, Maui's waiting, babe. Just don't let him suspect anything. Olivia, he's too broken to see straight. It's already done." The breath left my lungs as I read those words. This wasn't the Olivia I thought I knew. This version of her was cold, calculating, and utterly detached. "I thought he was full of it," Mia continued, breaking the silence. "But then I found more: bank transfers, flight itineraries, even pictures of the house they're planning to buy. She's been funneling the money into an account with both their names on it." I stared at her, my mind racing. "Why are you telling me this?" Mia's gaze didn't waver. "Because she's playing both of us," she said bluntly. "She promised Brain a fresh start, but I've seen her in action. The second she doesn't need him anymore, she'll drop him, just like she's dropping you. And me? I'm already collateral damage. I've got nothing left to lose." Her words were sharp, laced with bitterness, but they rang true. I didn't trust her, not completely. There was too much anger in her voice, too much venom. But the evidence she had laid out in front of me was undeniable. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice low. Mia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Revenge. Justice. Call it whatever you want. Brain doesn't get to walk away unscathed, and Olivia sure as hell doesn't either. You want to bring them down? I can help you, but we have to move fast." I studied her, searching for any hint of deception, but her eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. I didn't trust her motives, but I knew one thing for sure. Olivia had lied to me, stolen from me, and betrayed me in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. "I'm in," I said finally, my voice like steel. Mia's expression softened slightly, a small nod of approval. "Good. Because this is just the beginning." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope, sliding it across the table. "Everything you need to know is in here. Names, dates, bank accounts. It's all connected. We just need to find the right thread to pull." I picked up the envelope, its weight matching the heaviness in my chest. As I stood to leave, Mia called after me. I paused on my way out, glancing back at Mia. Her expression softened, and for the first time, her sharpness gave way to something almost empathetic. "I'm sorry about your daughter," she said quietly. "For what it's worth, I think Olivia's the one who's broken, not you." Her words lingered as I stepped into the cold night air. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement as my mind raced with possibilities, next steps, ways to make Olivia and Brain pay for everything they'd done. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what little dignity I had left, about safeguarding Maria's memory from people who thought they could profit from his death. They had no idea who they were up against. That night, I spread the contents of Mia's envelope across the table, each piece of evidence like a fresh punch to the gut. Text messages, bank statements, photos. It was all there. A damning map of betrayal. Olivia wasn't just selfish. She was calculating, strategic, and her lies went far deeper than I could have imagined. The money trail told the story. Deposits and transfers funneled into an account I didn't recognize, all under Olivia's name and linked directly to Brain. But the real shock came when I discovered proof of collaboration. Her parents, Diana, were in on it too. Their names appeared in emails and on checks tied to non-existent business ventures. Suddenly, everything made sense. The way Diana had always coddled Olivia, treating her like she could do no wrong. They had subtly undermined me for years, disguising their digs as advice. But now I saw the truth. They hadn't just enabled Olivia, they'd actively conspired with her. The tipping point came when I stumbled across an email exchange between Olivia and Diana. Diana, your husband won't suspect a thing. He's too focused on Maria. Just make sure the papers are signed before he catches on. Olivia, he won't notice. He's too broken to care. And once it's done, it's done. My hands trembled as I read the words. The papers. What papers? My heart raced as I tore through the pile of documents, desperate for answers. And then I found it, a property transfer agreement for our family home. The house where I grew up, where Maria spent her final days, was being sold. Maria had forged my signature, making it look like I'd agreed to the sale. They were planning to take everything. The insurance payout, the house, even our joint savings. I could almost hear Diana's dismissive voice echoing in my head, telling herself it was what's best for Olivia. The anger I'd been holding back erupted, but there was no outlet. I paced the living room, fists clenched, trying to steady my breathing. They thought they could manipulate me, use my grief to blind me, and steal everything I had left. But they were wrong. By morning, my plan was beginning to take shape. I needed more proof, more leverage. And I knew exactly where to start. My mother had been hinting at things for days. Things she'd seen, things she'd suspected. If anyone could help me connect the dots, it was her. I found her in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. She looked up as I entered, her sharp eyes narrowing. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting the cup down. "They're trying to sell the house," I said bluntly. Olivia and her parents forged my signature. Her face tightened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I knew it," she muttered. "You knew?" I asked, leaning forward. "I suspected," she admitted. "Diana's been sniffing around for months, asking questions about the property. She even tried to get your father to sign something when he was confused, but I intercepted it." Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. My father, with his slipping memory, had been just another pawn in their game. Olivia and her family had no shame, no limits to how far they'd go. She said it was just a precaution. My mother continued, her voice trembling with anger. But I didn't trust her. "I kept the papers. They're in the study." She didn't need to say more. I hurried to the study and rifled through the drawers until I found them. A legal form authorizing the sale of the house. My father's shaky signature scrawled at the bottom. A forgery. "They thought he wouldn't remember," my mother said, standing behind me now. "They thought I wouldn't notice. But I've been watching them. Diana's always been manipulative. But this is something else." I stared down at the papers, the weight of everything crashing over me. "They're not just after the money," I said quietly. "They're after everything. The house, the savings, everything Maria and I loved." My mother placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Then don't let them win," she said. "Fight back." Her words lit a fire inside me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Maria's legacy, about protecting what little I had left of him. Olivia and her family thought they could outsmart me, but they underestimated one thing: my resolve. They wanted to play games? Fine, but I wasn't going to sit back and let them take everything. If they thought I was broken, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The house wasn't just a property. It was part of my family's soul. My father had built it with his own hands, one nail and board at a time. It was where I'd grown up, where Maria had learned to walk, where we'd sat through countless nights holding her through the worst of her illness. It was sacred, and Olivia wanted to sell it to bankroll her escape. That morning, I called Marcus, an old friend who'd traded our high school debate team for a sharp legal career. If anyone could help me untangle this mess, it was him. After hearing me out, his tone serious. "This is messy. If they forged your signature, we can fight the sale, but we need more than just your word. We need proof, witnesses, documents, anything that shows a pattern of deceit." "I've got plenty," I replied, thinking of the stack of evidence from Mia and the forged papers my mother had intercepted. "But I need to know how to stop this before it goes any further." Marcus sighed on the other end of the line. "We need to move quickly. If they finalize the sale before we act, undoing it will be a nightmare. Let me pull some strings and dig into the legal filings. In the meantime, gather everything you can. Don't leave anything to chance." I thanked him and hung up, my mind already racing. Marcus was right. The clock was ticking. Claire and her parents weren't wasting any time, and neither could I. I kept notes every time they showed up here unannounced. My mother handed me a small notebook, its pages filled with dates and detailed accounts of Diana visits. Her careful handwriting chronicled every intrusion, every manipulative question they'd asked about the house and the property. It was more evidence, another piece of the puzzle I was putting together. I added it to the growing stack on the table, the case against Olivia and her parents becoming clearer with every passing hour. Next, I called Mia. As much as I hated relying on her, she had insights into Olivia's plans that I couldn't afford to ignore. "They're meeting with the realtor tomorrow to finalize the sale," she told me over the phone. Her tone was sharp, tinged with the bitterness that had become her trademark. "How do you know that?" I asked, suspicion creeping into my voice. "Because Olivia doesn't think I'm a threat," Mia replied, a wry edge to her words. "She keeps me in the loop, assuming I'll just go along with it. But she doesn't realize I'm one step ahead of her now." Her resentment was palpable, and while I didn't completely trust her, I couldn't deny that she was right about one thing. Olivia had underestimated both of us. With the pieces falling into place, I spent the rest of the day preparing. I copied every document, recorded every detail, and backed up everything I could. By nightfall, the study looked like a battlefield. Papers, files, and notes spread across every surface. My mother walked in with a cup of tea and set it down beside me. "You've got that look in your eye," she said. "What look?" I asked, glancing up from the corkboard where I'd pinned photos and timelines like some detective piecing together a case. "The same look your father used to get when someone tried to cheat him out of a deal," she said with a faint smile. Then her expression grew serious. "Don't let them take this from us. Don't let them take Maria's home." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just about me. It wasn't even just about the house. It was about protecting what Maria loved, about preserving what little I had left of her. "They won't," I promised her. The next morning, I dressed like a man going into battle. My suit was pressed, my tie knotted tightly, and the folder of evidence was tucked securely under my arm. Marcus had already filed a motion to halt the sale, but I knew I had to confront Olivia and Diana head-on. As I stepped out the door, my mother handed me something small, Maria's worn stuffed penguin. "Take it with you," she said softly. "For luck." I slipped it into my briefcase, the familiar weight grounding me. It wasn't just a toy. It was a reminder of Maria's laughter, her resilience, and everything Olivia had so easily abandoned. When I arrived at the realtor's office, Olivia's car was already parked out front. Inside, she and Diana sat at the table, their polished smiles masking the lies they'd been spinning for months. "You," Olivia said, her voice feigning surprise as I walked in. "What are you doing here?" I didn't bother with pleasantries. I set the folder down on the table and opened it, revealing the damning evidence inside. "Stopping you," I said coldly. Her face went pale, the blood draining from her carefully composed features. Diana, sitting beside her, tried to maintain her usual smug demeanor, but her eyes darted nervously to the documents. The realtor, caught in the crossfire, Looked like he'd give anything to disappear. "What is this?" Olivia asked, her voice tinged with faux confusion, but the slight tremor betrayed her nerves. "You tell me," I replied, leaning forward, "because it looks like a stack of evidence proving that you and your mother have been forging documents, siphoning money, and trying to sell this house behind my back." Diana's lips thinned. "There's no need for dramatics. This is just a simple real estate matter." "A simple real estate matter?" I shot back, my voice rising. "This is my home, Diana. My family's home. And you tried to take it away by forging my signature. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Or did you assume I was too broken to fight back?" Olivia shifted uncomfortably, her polished confidence unraveling. "Please, we've all been under a lot of stress. We were just trying to handle things while you were grieving." I slammed my hand on the table, cutting her off. "Don't you dare use Maria's death to justify this. While I was burying my kid, you were plotting to steal everything we built together. For what? To run off with Brain and live your fantasy life in Hawaii?" Her eyes widened. I'd hit a nerve. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I snapped. "I understand that you've been lying to me for months, funneling money into secret accounts and forging documents. I understand that you're willing to destroy what little I have left for your own selfish gain." I turned to Diana, who looked more rattled than I'd ever seen her. "And you," I said, my voice sharp, "have been complicit in all of this. Manipulating my father, forging signatures, covering for Olivia. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" Diana tried to regain her composure. "You're being unreasonable. We were only trying to protect Olivia's interests. You've been unstable since Maria's death?" "Unstable?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You mean grieving? Mourning the kid I loved more than anything while Olivia was busy planning her escape? If anyone's unstable, it's her. And you for enabling her." The realtor cleared his throat, looking increasingly uncomfortable. I think I should step out." "No," I said sharply, turning to him. "You're about to see just how illegal this so-called real estate matter really is." I pulled out my phone and played the recording Mia had given me. A conversation between Olivia and Brain, their plans laid bare in their own voices. "Olivia, the payout's in the account. Once the house sells, we'll have enough for the down payment on the Maui place." Brain, "What about your husband?" Olivia, "He's too distracted to notice. He'll never see it coming." The room fell silent. Olivia's face turned ashen, and Diana's composure finally cracked. "You recorded me?" Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. "No," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But someone who knows exactly what kind of person you are did. And she was more than happy to help me expose you." Olivia's eyes darted to the door, like she was considering bolting. "You can't prove anything," she said weakly. "Oh, but I can." I slid more documents across the table, bank statements, emails, evidence of forged signatures. Every transaction, every forgery, every lie. It's all here. And Marcus has already filed a motion to halt the sale. This house isn't going anywhere. The silence was suffocating. Olivia looked to Diana for support, but for once, her mother had no comforting words to offer. "You thought I'd just roll over and let you win," I said, my voice steady. "But you underestimated me. You always have. This ends now." I nodded, the weight of Marcus's words settling heavily in my chest. "What's our next move?" I asked. "We expose them," he said simply. "All of them, Olivia, Diana. Anyone who had a hand in this. We hit them with fraud charges, property theft, elder abuse, and anything else we can prove." It was a daunting prospect, but I was ready. This wasn't just about justice for me anymore. It was about protecting and ensuring that Olivia and her family faced the full weight of their actions. The first step was gathering more evidence. Marcus and I pored over every document, email, and transaction we could find, piecing together a case so airtight it left no room for doubt. Mia proved to be an unexpected but invaluable ally, providing even more damning information about Olivia's secret accounts and her relationship with Brain. "You don't realize how much she bragged to him," Mia told me during one of our meetings. "She thought he was her partner in crime, but Brain was careless. He left a trail everywhere he went. The evidence painted an even darker picture of my wife cheating. She hadn't just siphoned money from the life insurance policy. She'd also funneled funds from our joint savings, disguising them as fake expenses to cover her tracks. Diana had been complicit every step of the way, using their influence to hide her actions and manipulate legal documents. With Marcus leading the charge, we filed a civil suit against Olivia and her parents. The legal process was grueling, a constant reminder of just how much they had tried to take from me. But as the weeks passed, the tide began to turn. The first crack in their armor was Brain. Faced with mounting pressure, he turned on Olivia, providing testimony that corroborated everything Mia and I had uncovered. His statements confirmed Olivia's intention to steal the insurance payout and use it to start a new life in Hawaii. Diana, on the other hand, were slower to fold. They tried to spin the narrative, painting themselves as victims who had only been trying to support Olivia during a difficult time. But the evidence against them was overwhelming. Emails, bank records, and forged documents all pointed to their active involvement in the scheme. Then came the final blow. Marcus uncovered an even deeper layer of deception. Olivia and Diana had attempted to manipulate my father into signing over not just the house, but other family assets as well. They had targeted him during moments of confusion caused by his dementia, hoping to exploit his condition for their gain. That's not just fraud, Marcus said grimly as he showed me the documents. That's elder abuse. And the courts won't take that lightly. When the charges were filed, the weight of their crimes finally caught up with them. Diana faced a litany of legal consequences: fraud, property theft, conspiracy, and elder abuse. The public exposure was brutal. In our small town, their once respected reputations were reduced to nothing but scandal and disgrace. Olivia, of course, tried to play the victim. "I didn't know what I was doing," she cried during a deposition. "I was grieving. I made mistakes." But her tears didn't fool anyone. Not the lawyers, not the judge, and certainly not me. She had made her choices, and now she was paying the price for them. In the end, the courts ruled in my favor. The house was officially mine again, along with the remaining assets Olivia hadn't managed to siphon away. The life insurance payout, which she had planned to use for her new life, was frozen and redirected to its rightful purpose, supporting pediatric cancer patients in Maria's name. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was a moral one. Every step of the way, I had fought to protect what mattered most: my kid's memory and the legacy she left behind. But even with the legal battle won, the scars of their cheating remained. Olivia's actions had fractured something deep within me, something that couldn't easily be repaired. As for Diana, she retreated from the public eye, her influence and reputations in ruins. Her family had spent years building their status, only to see it crumble under the weight of their greed. I couldn't bring Maria back, but I could ensure that Olivia and her family would never hurt anyone else the way they had hurt me. The house was quiet now. A kind of stillness had settled over it, one that wrapped around me like a bittersweet calm. For months, it had been filled with the chaos of lawyers, documents, and the weight of betrayal. Now, with the legal battle behind me, there was finally peace, even if the damage remained. I sat on the edge of her bed, holding the penguin, letting the memories wash over me. The court's decision had ensured the house would stay in the family, but this fight had become about more than just a house. It was about Maria's legacy, about protecting everything she had loved and turning his memory into something meaningful. That's why I took the life insurance payout Olivia had tried to steal and used it to create the Maria Foundation. The foundation would fund pediatric cancer research and support families going through the struggles we had endured. The first grant went to the pediatric cancer ward where Maria had spent so much time. I visited the hospital to meet the families it would help, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark of hope. Maria's name would live on, not just in my heart, but in the lives of the children and families she would continue to touch. LT like enough.